A hedgehog will throw itself off a wall on purpose. It does not climb down. It does not look for another way. It rolls into a ball, drops, lands on 5,000 tiny springs, and walks off. That ball is the best armor any small animal has ever built. A fox can push one around a field for 20 minutes and give up. A dog cannot get a tooth into it. It has worked for millions of years against everything with a mouth. And Britain is now losing hedgehogs faster than almost any animal it has. For one reason. The ball is a perfect answer to a fox and a useless answer to a car. So, how that armor actually works, the chemistry that lets this animal eat things nothing else will touch. What happens when it shuts itself down for winter? Why it has been carrying antibiotic resistance since before anyone invented antibiotics. And why a creature that solved survival millions of years ago is failing inside 50. This channel does animals the way the evidence actually describes them, papers and all. Subscribe and let's go. Start with the spines, because everything else is arranged around them. A hedgehog carries somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 of them. Count that out properly. 5,000 separate objects, each one individually anchored in the skin, on an animal that weighs less than a bag of sugar and fits in 2 cupped hands. They are not quills in the porcupine sense, and they are not thorns. They are hairs. Modified, thickened, hardened hairs, made of exactly the same keratin as your fingernails and the hair on your head. Somewhere back in the family history, the coat simply got serious. Each spine is hollow, and the inside is not empty. It is braced with internal ribs of keratin, like the spars inside an aircraft wing. That structure is what stops the spine snapping when something leans on it. A solid spine of the same weight would shatter. A hollow braced one bends and springs back, which turns the whole coat into a shock absorber, and the hedgehog exploits that in a way that surprises people. It falls off things on purpose. Faced with a drop, a hedgehog will often just roll up and go over the edge, landing on 5,000 tiny springs. They survive falls that would kill most animals their size, and they do it often enough that rescuers see the behavior as routine rather than remarkable. Now the muscle, which is the part nobody ever thinks about, and it is what makes the whole thing work. Rolling into a ball is not a matter of curling up. Running around the edge of a hedgehog's back, where the spiny skin meets the ordinary furred skin, is a broad circular muscle. It works like a drawstring on a bag. When the animal contracts it, the loose spiny skin is pulled inwards and downwards, over the head, over the flanks, over the feet, until the soft parts are inside and the entire outer surface is spines. The spines themselves are muscled too. They are not permanently upright. A relaxed hedgehog lies fairly flat and smooth. A nervous one raises them. A frightened one crosses them over each other in different directions. So there is no angle of approach without a point in it. And it holds. A rolled hedgehog is under active muscular tension, and it can stay that way for hours. Foxes have been filmed working at one for long stretches, rolling it, pushing it, biting at it, and eventually walking away. Dogs give up. Most predators simply have no method, because there is no soft edge anywhere to start on. There are exceptions, and the main one is the badger, which has the jaw strength and the claws to force a ball open. That is the honest reason hedgehogs and badgers are so often discussed together in Britain, though the relationship is more complicated than the headlines suggest, since both animals want the same worms in the same fields. Hold that thought about the badger, though, because the thing actually killing hedgehogs is not an animal at all, and the scale of it is worse than most people assume. Before the chemistry, a note on who else is in the family, because most people have the relationships completely wrong. There are around 17 species of hedgehog spread across 5 genera, and they live in Europe, Africa, and Asia. That is the whole range. There are no native hedgehogs in the Americas and none in Australia. The animal you picture is one species, the European hedgehog, and its relatives include desert hedgehogs built for arid North Africa and long-eared hedgehogs whose ears stick well out of the spines and act as radiators. The one people keep as a pet is a different animal again, the African pygmy hedgehog, and it does not hibernate. Drop the temperature in a centrally heated house, and it will attempt to, which is a common way for pet hedgehogs to die. And the family is much older and much lonelier than it looks.
Hedgehogs are not related to porcupines, which are rodents. They are not related to echidnas, which are egg-laying monotremes on the far side of the mammal tree. 3 separate lineages independently arrived at the idea of covering themselves in sharpened hair, which tells you how good an idea it is. Now the chemistry, because past this point the animal stops being a pincushion and gets properly strange. A hedgehog can eat things that are not supposed to be edible. Toads with toxic skin secretions. Beetles that other animals learn to avoid. Bees and wasps, stings and all. It has a general tolerance for chemical defenses that would put most small mammals in serious trouble. The famous version of this is snake venom, and it deserves an honest treatment rather than the internet one. Hedgehogs do have a real resistance. A protein was isolated from hedgehog muscle in 1996 and named erinacin, and it neutralizes the bleeding component of viper venom, not just from European adders, but from snakes on other continents entirely. Hedgehogs have also been recorded attacking and eating adders, bristling their spines forward over the head and going in. But resistance is not immunity, and the older experimental literature is grim on this point. Hedgehogs bitten on the head by adders have died within hours. The dose required is far higher than for an animal of comparable size, which is impressive, and it is not infinite. Whoever told you a hedgehog cannot be killed by a snake overstated it. Then there is the behavior nobody can explain, and I mean that literally. It is called self-anointing. A hedgehog encounters some new smell or substance, licks it, chews it, works up a mass of frothy saliva, and then contorts itself into extraordinary positions to smear that foam across its own spines. The performance can go on for hours, and while it is happening, the animal is almost oblivious to everything around it. The list of things that trigger it is the strangest list in British natural history. One survey of the literature collected 34 separate triggers, including leather, tobacco, creosote, varnish, newsprint, human sweat, fox fur, and on one recorded occasion, a tortoise. Nobody knows why. The most popular theory is chemical defense, that the animal is loading its spines with something unpleasant. The problem is that half the trigger substances are not unpleasant at all, and the same hedgehog will anoint with a substance 1 week and ignore it the next. A field study in New Zealand added a wrinkle rather than an answer. Out of over 900 wild hedgehogs examined, only 19 showed signs of recent anointing. In the wild, it was mostly confined to the breeding season, and several times it happened in the presence of the opposite sex, which points at a sexual signal. Nestlings did it when removed from the nest, which points at something else entirely. In captivity, faced with novel objects, it may simply be displacement behavior, the animal doing something because it does not know what else to do. So we have a mammal that mixes a foam of its own saliva with an unidentified substance, applies it to 5,000 spikes, and has been doing it for as long as anyone has watched. And the honest scientific answer is that we do not know what it is for. I find that oddly reassuring. Quick question, and I would like a rough head count. Have you seen a live hedgehog in the last 5 years? Not a photograph. An actual one, in a garden, on a verge, anywhere at all. Answer in the comments and add roughly where you live, because I suspect the pattern in those replies will be bleak. Now the working night. Because the way a hedgehog experiences the world is not the way it looks. Its eyesight is poor. Not blind, but low resolution. Not much use for detail, and largely irrelevant to how it operates. The animal runs on nose and ears. The nose does most of it. A hedgehog forages by pushing its snout through leaf litter and grass, locating beetles and worms by smell alone, including prey several centimeters underground. The snuffling that gave the animal its name is not a mannerism. It is the search itself, out loud. The hearing goes well above our range, into the ultrasonic. A hedgehog can hear a beetle moving under a leaf, and it walks. This is the fact that changes how you picture your own street. A hedgehog covers 1 to 2 kilometers in a night, and a male looking for a mate can do considerably more. That small animal in your garden is not living in your garden.
It is passing through on a circuit that takes in a dozen gardens, several verges, and at least one road, which is why the most useful thing you can do for hedgehogs costs nothing at all. I will come to it in the practical section. Their diet is mostly beetles, caterpillars, earwigs, and worms. Slugs are on the menu, but are a much smaller part of it than gardeners assume, and slugs carry the lungworm that is one of the animal's serious killers. A hedgehog is a good friend to a garden. It is not a slug clearance service. That lungworm deserves a line of its own, because it is one of the quiet reasons hedgehogs die. The larvae are picked up from slugs and snails, mature in the animal's lungs, and produce a persistent cough and eventually pneumonia. A hedgehog rasping audibly in a garden is not clearing its throat. It is a rescue case. Now the winter, and the numbers here stop being cute. A hedgehog hibernating is barely a functioning animal. Its heart rate falls from somewhere between 190 and 280 beats a minute, down into the low teens. Its body temperature drops from around 35 degrees to somewhere between 5 and 10, tracking the air around it. Breathing falls from about 50 breaths a minute to a handful, punctuated by long pauses.
Those pauses are the part that stops me. A hibernating hedgehog holds its breath. Recorded apnea in this species has run to around 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours without taking a breath, at a body temperature you would find in a fridge. A human diver at the absolute limit of trained ability manages about 11 minutes. None of that is passive either. Biologists used to assume a hibernating animal simply cooled to match its surroundings. It does not. Body temperature is actively regulated all the way down, and if the air outside drops below about -5 degrees, a hibernating hedgehog will raise its own temperature to compensate without necessarily waking up at all. And it is not a coma. Touch a hibernating hedgehog and it will bristle and tighten its ball. Something in there is still on duty. Here is the counterintuitive part. Hibernation is not one long sleep. It is a series of torpor bouts, broken by arousals, where the animal warms itself all the way back up to normal temperature, stays awake for a few hours or a day, and then goes back down. Undisturbed animals do this roughly every week or so. Those arousals are ruinously expensive. Warming a whole body from 5 degrees to 35 by burning fat costs a very large share of the entire winter's energy budget. A hedgehog spends most of its stored reserves not on sleeping through the cold, but on repeatedly waking up in the middle of it. Which is why weight is everything. A hedgehog going into winter underweight does not wake up. The rule of thumb used by rescues is that an animal much under about 600 grams in late autumn is unlikely to survive until spring. And that creates the specific tragedy of the autumn juvenile. Hedgehogs born late in the year, second litters, in September or October, simply do not have time to reach the weight. They are out foraging in daylight in November, visibly small, running out of season. Those are the animals that fill rescue centers every winter. I did not know any of that the first time I found one. A hedgehog in the garden in daylight in late autumn, moving slowly, and my instinct was to leave it alone, because that is what you are told about wildlife. That was wrong, and I want to be blunt about it. A hedgehog out in daylight is not a hedgehog having a nice time. It is an emergency. I will come back to what to actually do. Second question, and this one is a fork. If you found one right now, would you know who to call? Honestly, yes or no in the comments. I am curious whether this is common knowledge, or whether almost nobody has the number. Now the babies, which are stranger than they have any right to be. A hoglet is born pink, blind, and, the obvious problem, inside a mother who is essentially a bag of spines. Evolution solved this in a way that sounds made up.
The spines are already there at birth, formed, but they are underneath a layer of fluid-filled skin. The baby comes out smooth. Within hours, the fluid is absorbed, the skin tightens, and around 100 soft white spines push through. Those first white spines are temporary. A second set, darker, comes through underneath within days, and the animal keeps replacing and adding spines for weeks. By the time it leaves the nest, it has thousands. A typical litter is 4 or 5, born blind and deaf, weighing about as much as a pound coin each. Very few of them make it. Mortality before independence is high, and the mother is easily disturbed. A nest interfered with in the first days can lead to her abandoning or eating the young, which sounds monstrous and is a straightforward calculation about a litter that is now unlikely to survive anyway. And here is the bit I keep thinking about. A young hedgehog gets one summer, roughly, to reach a weight that will carry it through a winter. Most do not. In the wild, average lifespan is short. 2 or 3 years is a normal life, though individuals can reach 7 or more. The whole species runs close to the margin every single year. Now the antibiotics. Because I flagged this at the start, and it is genuinely one of my favorite pieces of recent biology. Here's the claim, and then the mechanism. A superbug that our hospitals fight every day appeared on the backs of hedgehogs roughly 200 years before we made the drug it resists. Up to 60% of hedgehogs in parts of northern Europe are carrying it. 2 things live on a hedgehog's skin. One is Staphylococcus aureus, an ordinary bacterium that also lives on about 1/3 of all humans without doing anything. The other is a fungus called Trichophyton erinacei, which causes what vets call hedgehog ringworm. The fungus and the bacterium are competing for the same skin, and the fungus fights chemically.
It produces its own antibiotics, compounds in the same family as the drugs we manufacture. So on the back of a hedgehog, for a very long time, there has been a small chemical war. The fungus attacks with antibiotics. The bacteria that happen to resist survive and breed. The ones that do not, die. That is exactly the process we run in a hospital. It was running on this animal before hospitals existed. A large international team, including groups at Cambridge, Oxford, and the Statens Serum Institute in Copenhagen, sequenced the bacteria from hedgehogs across Europe and New Zealand, and published the result in Nature. They found 16 distinct lineages of a strain called MEC-MRSA. Mapping the mutations, they dated the 3 oldest lineages to between 130 and 200 years ago. Penicillin reached medicine in the 1940s. Methicillin came later. MRSA was first identified in a patient in 1960. So the resistance predates the drug by a century and a half. There's a photograph from that work I would recommend looking up. It is an agar plate with the fungus growing in the middle, ordinary staph streaked down one side and the resistant strain down the other. On one side, there is a clean ring of dead space where the fungus has killed everything. On the other side, the bacteria grow right up to it, untouched. That is antibiotic resistance, photographed in a system nobody designed. It matters beyond the trivia. Antibiotic resistance is usually told as a story of human error, overprescription, farm antibiotics, patients not finishing courses. All of that is real, and it is the main driver of what we face in hospitals. But those resistance genes had to come from somewhere before we ever started selecting for them. This is one case where the origin can actually be traced, and it is a fungus on the back of a garden animal. The researchers were also careful about something, and I will pass it on exactly as they put it.
This is not a reason to be afraid of hedgehogs. Around 1 in 200 human MRSA infections involves this strain. Transmission to people is rare, and it has been present in hedgehogs for 2 centuries without being a public health event. All wildlife carries bacteria. Hedgehogs are just the ones we happen to swab. Now the gene, which is the other thing this animal has ended up attached to. In 1980, Christiane Nusslein-Volhard and Eric Wieschaus published a screen of fruit fly mutants, an enormous, systematic hunt for the genes that lay out an embryo's body plan. It won them a Nobel Prize 15 years later, and it is one of the foundational pieces of modern biology. One of the mutants they found produced larvae covered in small, disordered, pointy projections. They named the gene Hedgehog. Years later, 3 labs went looking for the vertebrate equivalents and found 3 of them. The plan was to name all 3 after real hedgehog species, and 2 of them are desert hedgehog and Indian hedgehog. The third got named by a postdoc in Cliff Tabin's lab at Harvard, named Robert Riddle, and he called it Sonic Hedgehog. The origin story has 2 versions from the people who were there, which I find charming rather than annoying. Riddle's own account is that his wife brought home a magazine with an advert for the video game on the back, and that he partly liked it as a sideways nod to the band Sonic Youth. Tabin has recalled a comic book brought over from Britain. Either way, a gene in your body is named after a Sega character, and it is not a minor gene. Sonic Hedgehog is one of the central signaling molecules in vertebrate development. It tells a developing limb bud which side becomes the thumb and which becomes the little finger. It patterns the neural tube that becomes your spinal cord. It organizes the midline of the brain and the structure of the face. And then the joke curdles, in a way genetics has actually had to argue about. Mutations in this gene cause holoprosencephaly, a severe condition in which the forebrain fails to divide into 2 hemispheres. It is often fatal.
That means clinicians have had to sit in rooms and explain to parents that their child has a mutation in a gene named after a cartoon hedgehog. Several geneticists have said publicly that the whimsical naming era was a mistake, and the field has largely stopped doing it. Now, the part the whole video has been walking towards, the ball works. It is a genuinely excellent answer to a fox, a dog, an owl, a stoat. It has been the right answer for millions of years. The modern hedgehog body shows up in the fossil record long before most of the mammals we consider clever, and it has barely needed revision since, because the problem it solved stayed solved. And here is the weakness I promised you. A hedgehog's response to a threat is to stop moving and become a ball. That is precisely the wrong response to a car.
One study of British road data estimated something in the order of 167,000 hedgehogs killed by vehicles every year, and other estimates have run as high as 335,000. Against a national population that has been put at well under 1 million, those numbers are not a background loss. They are a significant share of the animal. The same instinct fails against every modern hazard. A strimmer approaches, the hedgehog balls up and does not run. A bonfire pile looks like an ideal nest, and it is, right up until November the 5th. Netting, litter, plastic rings, drains, steep-sided ponds. The animal's defense against all of them is to hold still and tense up. But roads are the visible part, and the underlying problem is quieter than that. Britain's hedgehog population has been falling for decades, and the current picture splits in 2.
In the countryside, the decline is severe. National assessments put rural losses at somewhere between 1/3 and 3/4 over the last 20 years, with the steepest falls in eastern England. In towns and cities, the picture has actually stabilized and may be improving. That split tells you the cause. It is farmland. Bigger fields, fewer hedgerows, less scrub, fewer rough margins, and far fewer insects than there were a generation ago. A hedgehog needs connected cover to move through and enough invertebrates to make a night's walk worth it. Modern arable landscape offers neither. The animal is not being killed off in the countryside so much as starved out of it, quietly, over decades. Which produces a genuinely odd conclusion. In Britain, the hedgehog's best remaining habitat is suburbia. Gardens, allotments, parks, railway embankments, churchyards. The species that is failing on farmland is being kept going by people with lawns.
With one condition attached, and it is the reason I mentioned those nightly walks earlier. So, the practical section. This is a rare animal video where what you do this week actually changes the outcome, and none of it is expensive. The single biggest thing is a hole. A hedgehog needs to cross 12 gardens a night, and modern fencing with gravel boards has turned British suburbia into a grid of sealed boxes. A gap of about 13 centimeters square at the base of a fence is enough for a hedgehog, and too small for almost any pet. Cut one, or lift one board. If your neighbors do it too, you have connected a corridor. And that is the whole basis of the Hedgehog Highway campaign. Second, water, not milk. Hedgehogs are lactose intolerant. Bread and milk, the traditional offering, causes serious diarrhea and can kill a weak animal. A shallow dish of water, and if you want to feed them, meaty cat or dog food or dedicated hedgehog food. Third, check before you cut or burn.
Look under and inside long grass before strimming, and never light a bonfire that has been sitting for days without moving the whole pile first, ideally to a new spot. Both of these kill large numbers of hedgehogs every year, and both are entirely avoidable. Fourth, ponds need an exit. Hedgehogs swim well and drown constantly because they cannot climb a vertical liner. A sloping edge, a plank, or a piece of chicken wire hanging into the water solves it. Fifth, slug pellets and heavy pesticide use remove the food supply and may poison the animal directly. If the hedgehogs are there, you have less need of the pellets anyway. And the one that matters most. A hedgehog out in daylight, lying still, wobbling, sunbathing, or obviously small in late autumn, is in trouble. Healthy adults do not do this. Contain it in a high-sided box with a towel. Put a covered hot water bottle underneath, no food or water beyond a shallow dish, and phone a rescue.
In Britain, the British Hedgehog Preservation Society keeps a national list of carers. That call is often the difference. Before the end, one complication, because the story is not the same everywhere. Hedgehogs were introduced to New Zealand by settlers who wanted something familiar in the garden. There are no native land mammals there to speak of, and the local invertebrates, lizards and ground-nesting birds, evolved with no experience of anything like this. Hedgehogs now eat native insects, snails, lizards, and eggs across large areas, and they are classed as a pest and controlled. The same animal Britain is trying to save is trapped and killed in New Zealand for very good reasons. So here is the third question, and it is the one I actually want argued about. Is a hedgehog worth protecting because of what it is, or because of where it is? The animal has not changed, only the address has. Tell me where you land. So what is a hedgehog?
It is a small, insect-eating mammal that solved its central problem a very long time ago, and then stopped. 5,000 hollow, braced hairs. One circular muscle that turns a body into a sealed sphere. A tolerance for poisons that lets it eat what nothing else will touch. A winter shutdown so deep it holds its breath for hours at a time. And a habit of foaming at the mouth and painting itself for reasons that remain, after decades of observation, completely unexplained. It also turns out to have been keeping records. 2 centuries of antibiotic resistance evolved on its back, in a war between a fungus and a bacterium that had nothing to do with us. Quiet proof that the thing we are most frightened of in medicine is older than medicine itself. And a gene named after its silhouette, currently building the hands of every vertebrate embryo on the planet. None of which the hedgehog knows about or benefits from in the slightest, because the animal itself is in trouble. And the reason is almost boring. Its defense is stillness, and stillness does not work on a road. Its food is insects, and there are fewer. Its habitat is connected rough ground, and we cut it into squares and fence them. The thing that gets me is the mismatch. This animal survived every predator Europe could produce. It out-armored them, out-chemistryed them, and outlasted most of them. And it is being finished off by garden fencing, tidy verges, and a slightly different type of hedge. That is not a tragedy on a grand scale. Nobody is going to make a film about it. It is a small brown animal disappearing from the edges of ordinary places, at a speed slow enough that most people will simply forget it was ever there in the first place. Ask anyone over 60 how often they saw hedgehogs as a child, then ask anyone under 20. The gap in those two answers is the entire story. Last question, and I would like real answers.
What is the animal you remember from childhood that you have not seen in years? Not somewhere exotic, in the ordinary places where you live. Name it below. I want to see how much of this is happening quietly everywhere. And if this is your kind of thing, real studies, nothing smoothed over, no cute ending bolted on, then subscribe. Coming up, an animal people fear for completely the wrong reason.